Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Motion Design Hotline. I'm one of your hosts, Evan Abrams. We're here to answer your After Effects questions, joined by my friend turned rival, Kyle Hamrick. How are you doing today, buddy?
Well, I was a lot better before I had to be on the show with you today.
I know, it's a surprising heel turn that we've turned into bitter rivals, all of it because of some pressing paper problems people have proffered upon us. We got a wonderful question from Umacorn in the chat here, if you're over on Behance, but also hello to everyone else in the chat. Penny Doodles, loving the puns, keep them coming. Reverb Mike, what's going on? We've got, who else is hanging out with us here, Kyle? Oh, and our mod, Voodoo Val, holding it down. Yeah. But let us know.
A couple folks over on YouTube as well. Hello.
Oh, fantastic. Christopher, what's going on? Let us know if you have any questions about what you see us doing on here. If you have questions about After Effects in general, we're here to help. But also we're here to hurt each other's feelings. We're going to be talking about some papercraft stuff. Umacorn, you sent in a question to us from a very dramatic Korean program. And which got us thinking. There's a lot of like tearing of photos, a lot of moving of paper. So we tried to emulate some of those things.
And just to kind of throw this in, we had that show intro has a lot of collage-y elements as well. And if that's something that you're looking to do, we already talked about that like 2 months ago. I'm not sure what Evan's doing, so I'll just keep tap dancing for a minute here. But in terms of being able to work with those paper textures and have cutout looking objects and that kind of stop motion-y vibe, we covered all that on our quixotic collage questions, something like that. I don't remember the title. We always get so cutesy and alliterative here.
I don't know if you can hear, but my dog is going nuts. It sounds like someone's breaking into my house. We'll find out if something crazier happens on the stream. So yeah, that's what we're going to be getting into. It'll be a lot of moving of paper around. So Kyle, thankfully you are up first with your example. So what am I
Thankfully.
doing? Yeah, thankfully, because I'm gonna switch to your screen real quick, and then while you tell people about this, I'm gonna hopefully continue to hear it on my headphones while I see what's going on. Just a moment.
So, there's a couple different ways to do this look, but of course, I wanted to kind of start with the real thing, and having some good old actual paper is honestly gonna give you the best look most of the time. But it's not always as controllable as you want it to be, which is something that we'll dig into later. But I always like to bring some real-world textures or elements to my projects when I can. So if you just take a regular old piece of paper and just, give yourself some tears, make whatever shapes you need. If you need long ones, great. As you can see here, I just kind of tore one sheet of paper a couple times to give myself a few tears. Although my scanner got a little blurry down here at the bottom, so I didn't use that part, honestly. But I used a couple of these, and all you have to do is just kind of crank up the levels so that you get pure black and pure white. Though if you do want some of this like lovely edge business here, and see how it does have kind of some areas of partial transparency, you can certainly keep that if you want to. I do love how kind of fibrous and detailed this is in here. And we're going to be kind of faking some of this paper texture later. And you can't get this good stuff. I haven't been able to anyway. This kind of little thready, fibrous look. But so I just made myself one PSD here with two different edges so that I could kind of have some variety. And then what I did is I brought those into After Effects and I wanted to kind of challenge myself to see how much I could do with just this one edge. And of course, this is quite a bit bigger than my composition, right? And I think we all know that that's the trick to a lot of this kind of stuff is having a lot more to work with than you need. And so this top layer, go ahead.
It's important to try to conserve paper. We can't be
exactly.
Our various projects.
I must then apologize for this piece of stunt paper that I tore for no real reason except to just illustrate my point. I'll scan that later and use it for another project. Okay, don't get upset.
Yeah, we use every part of the paper around here.
Yeah. nose to tail, snout to tail. I don't know.
Yeah, this is farm to table motion graphics here.
So in this pre-comp here, you'll notice today we're going to have a lot of pre-comping, which I kind of try to avoid a lot of the times just because it's easier. But so in this pre-comp, you'll see I just did a whole bunch of single frame work here, just kind of trying to give myself as much variety as possible. I flipped the scale at one point here. And see, I just gave myself like a lot of different edges. And then I brought in a paper texture. And, oh no, I can't see that correctly. Well, blending modes and mats are a thing you're going to see a lot today as well. So this is a good time for using the Stencil Luma blending mode. And so the areas of black will get cut out on everything below this layer. And so this is a real nice way to do this. And then I can apply this paper texture from Adobe stock just right over the top. And then I move that around every frame as well. So look at this. I have like 10 or 11 nice, very different feeling things. And so then I can bring that into another composition and start animating that. But what I wanted to do first was give myself the ability to color this and have that lovely little torn edge, which I'm actually faking here, but not too much.
It's
so,
a fake.
Yeah, I just used the good old tint effect to add one of our brand colors to the paper here. And so since the paper is white, I can just kind of tint it, and you still get all that lovely shading from the paper texture. And then I took a duplicate of this layer and offset it just a wee bit. Like I just kind of punched it over a little bit in X here. If I do it more, you can see it's just the same thing. And then I put a little bit of a Turbulent Displace on it just to kind of give it a little more variety. But you can see that it's still got most of that same kind of fibrous look here. And so now when I put that into something like this, I get a nice bunch of variety, but these are all just one composition. And so what I did is used the time remapping. This is just, you can go to time remap or time freeze frame, and that will make a keyframe on a single frame of your composition. And then each one of these is using just the next frame. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. And so each one is just kind of, you're using the time remapping to choose which version of the thing you get. Of course, you could repeat one of them when you kind of get on the other side of the screen. And then I'm using essential properties to just tint the different colors. And so this will be totally variable as you want. You can kind of decide whatever color you want that to be as you go. And so with one edge scan and one paper texture, I made a whole array of different things here, but they all, fit together and kind of fit into the same universe. And these are all just kind of like basic rotation or position keyframes. We can dig into that if we want, but
yeah, I think so, because they're very smooth, and I think a lot of people probably struggle with how to make good.
Sure. Well, let me grab maybe just like a couple of these, and I will isolate those and bring up these keyframes. So for starters, we are at 12 frames a second here, which I think always helps. I've been using 12 frames a second a lot lately, but especially for things that are kind of a little bit stop motion-y, you want it to kind of have that slight jerkiness to it. It really helps sell that. And these are all just copies of the same thing. The anchor point is set up here a little bit above where the composition is, and each of these is parented to the one above it. So this second one is parented to the one above. So as each of these moves, the next one is actually only moving from kind of just behind it. Let me maybe copy one of these to a new composition real quick if we want to look at that a little more isolated. So here's the first one, right? Not that exciting. And I did kind of figure out what felt like a good movement here in the graph editor. And they're all using the same curves. And so to make the next one, I just copied this, and let's go ahead and change the color to something different just so we'll be able to see it. And then if I parent this to that one, then I can kind of push it out from behind and then make sure that first one is sort of just here. Let's kind of offset that so it's already here. You want to make sure that's like just hidden. There we go. And then let's go ahead and change this to a different frame so that we get some variety there. And so the first one comes out, and then the second one comes out. And you just kind of repeat that process until you're happy with it. And then you'll notice each of these is just slightly offset in time as well. Looks like I did one frame a piece here. And so as I kind of step through it, you can see each one is just pushing out from just behind the edge of the previous. And the vertical wipe is doing exactly the same. It's just using position instead of rotation there.
Perfect. Yeah, and I don't know, I think there's something to be said with things when we're emulating the physical, that it's not like it's not like it shows up out of nowhere, right? It's like, oh, it seems to logically come from, they were hidden underneath. You can kind of see them, like no strange surprises coming in. Anyway, it looks like stop motion papercraft, right?
Yeah.
So I think you nailed that one.
And to your point, there's a little bit of drop shadow on each of these as well to kind of help. Here, what am I looking at? This one. To kind of help sell that they are just barely floating above another piece of paper, right?
Yeah. It's all about those details, baby. All those,
yeah.
all those little details, all those little bits. So yeah, go out there, rip some paper. Rip your parents' paper.
Of course,
grab some money out of your parents' wallet, rip it up, and then
tear it in half. You have to know, if you're doing that, you got to have the real thing. Yeah. Although money isn't, at least our American money, I assume yours is the same. It's not quite paper. It has sort of a higher cloth content to it as well than. And of course, like plastic strips and other weird stuff now for the counterfeit protection. And
our money is 100% plastic now. It is wild. Okay, so let's.
But I did notice that I mentioned that I cheated a little bit. I'm obviously using real paper here, but I cheated a little bit with our old friend Turbulent Displace, and that is. While I probably could have figured out a way to like get this real nice edge, to be able to tint this the way I wanted and get this edge seemed like it would have just been a little harder a little more work than I probably wanted to do, frankly. And then for some of these other things that we're doing, you're just not going to be able to get a real paper tear to cooperate in the ways that you need it to be as flexible and editable, right?
That's true.
So there's this little recipe that we kind of came up with. Well, I didn't come up with it. Someone came up with this probably 25 years ago, and it works really well. So I'm going to, this works with a solid. I'm just going to use a shape layer here, but you can just kind of create a shape of some kind here. And then if you add our old friend Turbulent Displace, Turby, as we like to call him. The default thing is way too big. But if you dial this in, you can get some really nice stuff. So if you bring the size down to somewhere around 10, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my layer controls so that I can see this edge better. You kind of just play with these settings, maybe an amount somewhere in the 20s, size somewhere around 10, something like that. And then you crank the complexity up to maybe around 10-ish. You start getting a really nice torn paper edge look, right? And so now you have a totally editable, let's bring these layer controls back, and maybe set this to something nice, and there we go. We can make this path whatever we want it to be, and you can kind of make this as straight or as bendy as you want. You can have like big chunks coming out of part of it and like hard cuts. And see, you can have a nice crunchy edge there. And then you can, of course, apply a paper texture to that in whatever way you like. In this case, I'm using the multiply blending mode. And my favorite little switch here, preserve transparency right in the middle, which looks at the transparency of everything below it and says, use that.
Now, people,
so,
I want you to remember these early things because it's going to be important later.
Yeah, we're laying some groundwork here. Basically, everything else we're doing is using variations on this technique. Yeah. And then you're like, but Kyle, I want that torn edge. Well, just make a duplicate of this thing. Turn it white or maybe almost white. You still want a little bit of that paper color in there, right? And then let's offset the position just a little bit. I'm going to do it a lot so you can really see it here. And just kind of futz with maybe the evolution or some of the size settings or something like that. Let's kind of turn those layer controls back off and then kind of tuck this right back up where we want it. And hey, looky there. Paper, totally controllable, totally editable with a nice torn edge. You could, of course, like offset this path a little more if you want, or if this is something that needs to be really easy to work with, you could link the two paths together so that you only have to edit one of them. Whatever you're going for.
Perfect. Yeah, because, what if you don't have paper, right? You just don't have paper liner. You can't be ripping all the paper up.
The kids these days don't have printers anymore, so maybe they don't have paper around the house. I don't know.
I had to print something the other day, and it really freaked me right out. How about... Well, let's Kyle. Let's move ahead and start destroying some more memories. Let's rip some other stuff in half.
Oh yeah, I would love to see what kind of stuff you plan to rip in half. I'm sure it's nothing that's going to make me mad at all.
It won't. It's going to be so good. It's going to be nice.
The betrayal.
So, exactly. So we're going to get ripped here. Obviously, I would never tear a picture of Kyle. I would not tear a physical picture of Kyle. I'll tear as many digital pictures of him as I want, but these physical things are important, and because the picture steals his soul by ripping it, I would inadvertently free his soul from it, and I don't want to...
I'm going to pause you for a second. Sure. Can you folks hear Evan? It sounded like... I just saw one comment about your audio, but...
Well, I hope not.
Maybe it's fine. If you can't hear Evan, please let us know.
Yeah, keep us posted. But yeah, we're gonna find out. I don't know. No one seems to be yelling about it, so we're gonna...
Yeah, just one comment so far.
Okay. Perfect.
That's a confirmation. You're good.
Whew. All right. So what we're doing is we're going to try to procedurally rip this thing out, and the way I want to do that, we're going to set this up from the very beginning, and the way you want to do that is just start off with make a composition, fill it with whatever you're going to be ripping. This keeps us nice and easy. So if we don't want to rip a picture of Kyle, we just want to rip a big grid of squares. It's also really helpful if you're building this kind of effect to just start with something that's a big grid of squares. Because most of the manipulations and stuff that you do will show up and make sense, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, my volume is a little lower. I'm gonna just bump my slider up there. So
bump it.
Bumping them sliders. Now, the next thing that we want to do is I need two halves of this. Now, it's important if we're ripping this that both halves of the rip be identical and exactly the same, right? They have to be identically rippable objects. I'm going to bump my audio a little bit more. And just kind of keep creeping up on it. So we need these two halves to marry each other exactly. They have to be harmoniously on top of each other. So there's no weird tear in between when we line them up. So I've just created a blue solid in here. I guess I don't need this proportional grid, but it helps me to get things more or less kind of in the center. I drew a bit of a mask around here. And then I've used a roughen edges to just chunkify. Let's call this an initial chunkification of this edge. And if you were to take that edge, and we're just going to come in here, I'm going to take our photo contents, drop that into a new composition. Let's make this nice and big, this composition. We're going to bring those settings way up, way much bigger than it probably needs to be. But we're going to be compositing this somewhere else later. So let's give ourselves all the gutter space that we want for this sort of guttery type of thing that we're doing. And so we've got contents. We're going to bring out a photo mat. The mat is using the same dimensions as the photo. And so this plus this We just go ahead and we say, photo contents, please observe that as track matte like this. And if we wanted a perfectly matched second half, then we could simply invert, and then we get both of them together, right? So far, so good, right? Except, ooh, Kyle, look, you have a big crack down the middle.
Oh.
That's no good. That's going to, and this is just a little bit of pixel tearing that can happen as the two things kind of move over top of each other. Now, we can go down to something like an alpha add to try to get that to go away. You see, we have removed that entirely. So, oh boy, the explanation for why this type of pixel tearing happens.
Because life is unfair.
Yeah, you would think that something with 50% opacity plus another thing of 50% opacity would equal 100%, right? Wrong.
Sure.
It's yeah. What a silly assumption to have, Kyle. It turns out it actually makes 75%. So that's why we end up with this. Anyway, alpha add is like normal, but it is going to make sure that we are indeed this plus this equals great. And so
let's take a second and call that out, because that is the solution to a lot of these little compositing annoyances. Alpha add mode, not always, but it is often the solution. Yeah. It's worth trying.
So that was the thing that I just wanted to point that out here, because we really want this stuff to kind of just work out. Now, the other thing that's important here is I'm going to manipulate one half of this photo away from the other. So if we were going to do this just in a most basic setting, I might pre-compose both of these two together. So I'm going to pre-compose that as right side, right? And then I will pre-compose this one as left side. And this is where they're going to start to diverge from each other. But you notice, because I pre-composed it, the crack is back. We're going to solve that in a little bit, but you know that we can't really do the same alpha add trick exactly. But I think let's just get this thing ripped. Let's just rip this thing, and I'm going to use our old friend CC page turn. You have another friend?
This explains why you're ripping me in half.
The betrayals continue here on the program. So CC page turn is a way of grabbing a corner and lifting it up. Now, what corner is being lifted and how and in which way? Well, we've got controls over here. So it's going to grab the bottom right corner. And in this case, imagine, if you will, is grabbing the imaginary corner way down there, right? And that's then going to peel this up. And it looks like this is like made of weird cellophane, right? That's the kind of it's like a gel, right? So I'm going to crank up the back page opacity like this. And I could even just say, none. I could say no, don't use any texture for that at all. Or you could probably just bring a different texture on down and make use of that. But for now, let's leave it like this. And let's just get it kind of tearing, right? Let's just rip this thing in the right way. I actually prefer to use classic UI. I prefer the classic mode. And that's because the classic mode, the indicator is saying whence, what place is actually being ripped. Like, where is the rip line? And then
I wish they used whence in the actual tech documents.
Yeah, that's how I would have phrased it. And so what I want is to bring this to around 180 or something, because I want to peel away like that. And it's really easy for us to just say, hey, the indicator is going to go there. I'm going to change us now to a layer color that we can see, perhaps. Maybe like a lavender, like this. Can we see the indicator better now? Yeah, it's a little bit better. So I'm just going to keyframe that fold position, and I'm actually going to keyframe the fold direction as well. And from that, we're just going to give ourselves a nice 3-second, a nice languid rip of the page like this. And we are going to change the folding direction, so as we kind of go, to be like a more aggressive angle. So we're going to start.
That's the key. You're almost never going to tear in a perfectly straight direction.
Yeah,
a little bit of variation there really helps make it look real.
Yeah, so maybe we start closer to a 180 and we get sort of more afield as we go. Like we really got to put some more mustard on it. And we keep pulling it down like this. And we end up with something like this. So it's being pulled down and away. If you want to rip both sides, well, you just apply the same thing to both sides, and then we're ripping it away like that. But we need our special edge back there, so we might as well come into our left side here, and we are just going to go ahead and duplicate these, and now we have a photo mat that is going to reveal what is underneath. I got a picture of some paper. I wonder if we used the same paper.
Maybe that really wide one, kind of crinkly.
Super. Oh, mine doesn't have as many crinkles. I went with a kind of a softer, kinder, gentler paper.
Also, Evan, I remember a time when I was your special edge.
Oh dear. It's true. It's true. Oh, this is like the drama of the Beanie Baby movie all over again. So. Anyway, we're gonna use this paper. It's gonna look at the same mat. We're gonna invert that mat. That's sort of one way we might go about doing this. But the point is that we have to get like over there, right? So hold on. I'm just gonna go back to the original example. Hold on. It's under photo. There we go. So this is why it kind of helps us to not make these things any larger than they need to be. Because this comp is just big enough to have the paper, have the rips. Now, I went ahead and I used a couple of things in here. One, I'm using some Turbulent Displace. I'm getting double turbies on this thing. And one is making little micro tears. The other one is making more macro tears to this. And so that the bottom edge is more different than the top edge, right? And we're bumping that torn mat over a little bit such that it'll appear to be revealed underneath. And then the other thing that we've got on here is something called MiniMax that I've applied to the other element that is providing our other cutting angle. Now, MiniMax is it's making decisions about like minimums and maximums of values on the border area, or
it can grow or shrink the edges of your layer. Yeah, basically,
and it does it sort of like a nearest neighbor type of thing. But if you use, so this is another situation where, how do I fill in those little cracks? Well, a minimum and a maximum, a little Minimax can solve that problem because we are pushing that boundary one way or the other. So I'm just going to really quickly go and just try to be conscious of time. We have a lot of examples to get through today. That this is now sort of ripping away, and that's revealing what's going on underneath. I've also got a back photo in here, which is sort of a copy of the over photo, but it's got a fill and a noise on it, just because I wanted to make some noisy.
Yeah, give it some texture.
Exactly, and then use that as our back photo layer. But you must make sure that the alpha is the same, so otherwise it'll be kind of weird when that happens. But that's how we get this nice kind of ripping tearing situation running on through. So it's I don't know, it's that easy to rip things up in here. It's as easy as just adding a few layers. Oh, Kyle, I'm sounding more callous and unpleasant by the moment as I continue.
Well, I mean, I think like I said, the theme of a lot of these are going to be, you need to kind of set a thing up. A lot of these techniques do require pre-composing, just so you can kind of like sandwich everything into one thing, so that an effect like page peel can kind of look at all the things that you need it to see, but then not other things that you don't need it to see.
Yeah. And the other thing, when we talk about pre-composing, why did I put it in this big thing, right? Well, it's in here so that there's space for the paper to kind of be visible, because then when we comp this, so that lives in here, and all these layers are three-dimensional, so that I can move around them with a camera. And if we wanted to like follow where that rip was going, or we wanted to tilt this in a way that we would actually see where that rip landed, we have to account for that space. And then the other thing is in here, by comping all of that stuff together, we're now able to drop a drop shadow on it. Because if we did drop shadows to the individual papers, right, this would be dropping a shadow onto its neighbor, which we do not want because they're not ripped apart yet. So it's, Kyle, it's a lot of like nesting and stacking inside of each other to get the right shadow coming off of the right stuff.
I found that too. A lot of the little detail bits, you end up having to do a pre-compose just so that you can get the shadows correct or something. Maybe you pulled off all of it in one comp before that, but then it's those little compositing details that sometimes it's just much easier to pre-compose.
Oh yeah, and we're gonna have more of those problems in my last example. But Kyle, let's cut to yours here. We got lots more.
Yeah, well, I'm not typically a vengeful person, but when I saw your example ripping me in half, that just felt like the absolute perfect place to make use of one of the other examples that we had seen in here. And so I made this with some claws that just rip right across an image. And what better image than your face?
There's a whole bunch of those in the world. If you scour burning dumpsters, you find many posters of Evan. Because of my war with the werewolf clans, I guess.
Of course. And, honestly, I was surprised. The actual, tearing was quite easy once, with this torn edge that we were looking at. It's basically just that. But of course, to start out, we needed this hand. And in the example we looked at, it's just one frame of this. I felt like I needed a little sequence here. Where is my claws here? So I felt like we needed a little sequence to kind of help give it some life. And I couldn't find a stock photo that did what I needed, so I just had to stick on some nails and take these photos myself, as one does.
Kyle, those aren't your natural nails. I feel more betrayed than ever.
Unfortunately, no.
Well, I guess because we don't hear the clacking sound on the keyboard.
I did want to add some sound effects to this one, but I did not have time. They are quite lovely, though, aren't they? And so, we have this, and that means we're going to have 5 contact points to make our tear, right?
Okay.
So let's take a look at what we actually did. This composition, again, does have several kind of layers of pre-composing, just because that's kind of, again, was sort of the easiest way to deal with this. But this is all based on one shape layer with that turbulent displace trick, and then 5 strokes that are being kind of drawn on here. Rather than just using a single trim paths keyframe, I found that it was better to manually keyframe each frame per nail because they didn't all quite move the same way, and it was 7 frames or something, so it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, and even if the path that you're going to be dragging on is covered by the thing, you're still going to see that the leading edge is not at the Yeah. So when you put the nails on here as well, see, I was basically just following along with that, and then this scratch is parented to the claw, so that moves around with it in case we needed to kind of reposition or anything like that. But that's all this is. You can see I'm using a bit of the taper on the stroke here. Again, I can kind of dial into that if we want, but I was just kind of using the taper. And some of these don't go all the way to 0. Some of them do, because you don't necessarily want a hard point on all of them. This is the thumb that I'm working here. Sometimes you want it to be a point. Sometimes you want it to be a little bit roundy there. But of course, once you add the turbulent displace, they all get kind of crunchified anyway. Let's turn that back on so you can kind of really see. You get that nice rippy, teary kind of vibe to it. So at this point, people are probably like, wait, you're drawing lines. You're supposed to be making holes.
Yeah, exactly. But any shape can kind of be whatever you want it to be here in After Effects, right?
Yeah.
So what we're doing here, we're not actually seeing those scratches. We're using those as a mat for our Evan layout. So this is our Evan layout, which has its own internal animation and a lot of blending modes and stuff, which again, we can dive into if we want. These project files would be available, so you're free to look into that as well. But this is set as an inverted mat. So we're setting this to use, here's our layout. We're setting that to use these scratches as a mat, but then we want the inverse of that so that it's scratching away from that layer, right? Mm-hmm. And then below that, we have a little bit of paper texture, colored blue, so that you kind of get something below that, right? And then we wanted that internal kind of torn texture there. So there's just a second slightly offset version of that thing, and that is just driving this other paper layer. And it looks like perhaps where did I do it? There should be a little bit of a shadow somewhere. There's one on the hand, but maybe I took it back off and never fixed it. Yeah, there should be a little bit of a shadow inside these tears, but it looks like maybe I took that back off and never fixed it. So ignore that part. I will show you one other interesting thing shadow-wise, though, which is on this hand. You can see that it has some shadows, but I took advantage of the effect mats or effect masks so that we could utilize kind of some different maybe I didn't track this properly, kind of some different shadows in here so that it's heavier under the fingertips and then lighter under this area of the hand because that's further away from the paper, right? Although it looks like I made a little oopsie here too, and I should have tracked this mask down because, of course, all of this animation is happening in a pre-comp, and so this mask is not going to follow that layer.
Right.
So don't look too closely at that.
Well, I think that's a great tip for people who are trying to add dimensionality to their flat stuff, right? Like,
yeah. Think about how it physically sits, and you can vary. In this case, I'm using two mats and like kind of cutting back away from one of them, and then you can kind of decide how heavy or a light. There, you can really see it. So it's heavy under there, and then none under the hand.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think this, like, yeah, how are we gonna do that? Well, take a picture of a hand and then just move it. Like, in this style of working, you're kind of doing the thing by, in some ways, actually doing the thing, but then trying to generate pieces, and I don't know. Hopefully, this is showing how you can get things to look. I don't know. Real isn't really our goal, right? Because we're still...
Yeah, it's a stylized version of realism and a controllable version of realism.
Yeah, like it's it's all collage and artifice, but like we're trying to fake it halfway, basically.
Yeah, and I think like because this is a darker paper under here, and because the hand was moving fast, I didn't even realize that I had missed finishing the shadows there. So sometimes a lot of this is just knowing what you can get away with. And then, some of this is just other pre-composing to kind of get that final like movement push here. In this case, it felt like doing that all in one place was going to cause too much of an issue with the various collapse transformations that I would have needed to have the rest of this paper visible and yada, yada, yada. So it was easier to just pre-compose one more time and do it that way.
Perfect. Well, folks, if you haven't had enough pre-composing, we've got hopefully we've got time to get through all of this last thing.
I think so. Real quick before you step away, I will point out again, there's a lot. It was kind of secondary to this, so we don't necessarily have the time to dig into it here probably. But there's a ton of pre-composing that happened specifically so I could do all this little paper styling here. having a little bit of like blurriness to the edges and offset fills on things. So again, there's so many different blending modes going on in here. So just again, you can always dig into these project files after the show if you want to see exactly how these things are built.
MotionDesignHotline.com, a real website.
I like how that's become our tagline.
Yeah, a real website for real people. So, Kyle, we got to take it up a notch here. That we're
oh, so much worse.
We've gone from a kind of tearing to a kind of effigy burning in this case. So yeah, if you're breaking up with a loved one, think about incinerating photos of them. I don't know. I hear it's cathartic. This is a lot of a lot. There's a lot of, I mean, thematically this is a lot, but also in terms of composing stuff, this is a lot. We're going to be going back to kind of our roots with this. I would say putting this together really reminded me a lot of Video Copilot stuff.
Yeah.
And again, like most things, we are going to be starting with simple ingredients and then just layering and recombining and changing them. But there are a lot of elements that go into this. So here it is on transparent. We'll just take that transparency away. And I just want to highlight some of the things that we're going to be creating. So right off the jump, you can see there is a warping, like a heat warping that's happening to the photo. So I'll just take those. Those are going to be our kind of displacement adjustment layer that's on top of here. So if we observe that, we've got displacement on and off. We've got this glowing edge that is burning, and I've actually done two of them. So one is sort of this subtly one up here, and then we're just going to go down and we have another one that's happening down there. So that is like our burning, incinerating edge. We have some embers. We have these embers that are left over when the stuff rolls through. We also have various levels of ash and smoke that are happening. So if we come down, we have some smoke and some more smoke, and I'll just remove those so we can really get down to the core of it. Then we also have a little bit of darkening of the edge, so I'll remove those darkened edges so we can get right down.
A lot of edge stuff going on here.
Yeah, a lot of edge cases happening. And in the end, we end up with this truly hideous, glorpy, like, removal, which isn't that sophisticated, right? Like, I don't know if we would describe this as anything particularly passable, but only when we start to add everything back in does this start to turn into something, right? It's
definitely something.
Is this anything? Is this something? And so only by sort of adding all of the stuff back together do we end up with something that is passably an incinerating photo. Anyway, the reason to sort of go through that is it can be really hard to see how are we going to get there from here?
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's sort of what the compositing thinking comes from. So, okay, let's take it to sort of the very beginning. You want to create a composition that's going to hold the thing being burned. So we've been burning Kyle in all of this, but if we instead type out, I don't know, something, we type out something else that we're going to be burning, it doesn't really matter because all of this is going to be very procedural. So if we come back to, actually, we want to make sure that this is at least something that's going to stand out. So let's do like that. And then we come out to burn to stuff in use, and you're going to see exactly that this is indeed incinerating exactly the same, right? And it really crispifies out as you go with that. So this is the plan. We want to be able to swap out whatever's in there for whatever we want, whether it's Kyle, whether it's something else that's wronged you. You want to be able to put that effigy in there and burn it up.
To be fair, I have wronged a lot of people.
That's true. Well, we know which side of the
Yep.
lycanthrope wars you are on. So come back to get your stuff in a container. Then all of it is going to be controlled by this composition that is just spreading from lightness to darkness. And if we sort of drill down into what this is, we've got this. Kyle, it's your old friend Circle in here. Circle and a turbulent displace that is causing this kind of inky bleed through here. So Circle looks like this. The Circle, you can feather its kind of growth. And so it is starting from rigid and getting lighter and lighter. And they're like, that's not wacky enough. Let's turbulize that, get our turbs on here, and starts to get turbulent. Then...
Turbine it up.
Yeah. Then I'm going to deploy a fractal kind of on top of that is set to overlay. So if it's set to normal, it's going to look like this. But if we set it to overlay, it's really only going to show up in those gray margins. And that's exactly what we want, because we want the gray margins to be disturbed. So a little fractal in there is going to go a long way. And then I'm actually going to intermix that pre-comp of whatever the thing is that we are burninating. And that's going to help this stuff kind of cling and interact with the edges. You can kind of see how this is also set to overlay. So it's in those areas. And then on top of that, we are going to deploy a brightness and contrast, and then maybe a blur, and that's going to crispify this whole thing. So you can start to see where it's sticking to the edges. So if we just did the brightness and contrast, so I'm gonna look at that real quick. Actually, maybe I didn't really need the Gauss blur on that, because it's not really blurring that much. But the Gauss blur can make things kind of glorpier or not if you want. So these are our instructions, and you want to think like, if this is a transition, this is the speed, this is how it's going to burn.
Yeah, this drives everything else that you're going to do.
Yeah, so the amount of time it takes to go from everything to nothing, that's being determined by the radius, and the feather is working in there as well to get this sort of spreading towards the outside. Okay, so with that in mind, do this however you want, basically. Like this is where you really want to kind of play around and warp the stuff. We can always come back to it later. So let's start trying to build up some of these, right? That if we have those two component parts, I'm gonna jump back into the final every so often, but we've got the burn me and the transition mat, and we'll just slip both of those into a new composition. And we're going to see kind of how this goes. And the first one is we are going to have burn me look at the transition mat, and right away it's going to do nothing because we need to switch to Luma mode. And there we go. That's the bad going away that we wanted, right? So there he goes. It's going. What else? So Kyle, what else do we need to layer on here to make this like good?
Well, we need glowy edges for starters.
Okay, let's do that one, because I think that one's going to be pretty interesting. So we start off looking like this, because this is just a copy of the transition mat. Let's call this glow edge, and let's just make it orange so we can find it later. That's very useful. And so how do we make this edge? Now you might say, like, Evan, just get the find edges, right? Just put find edges on it, man. That'll get you some edges. And then just invert it. Hey, look at that. You got some edges, right? I'm going to say kind of, because although this is sort of nice and we can just go ahead and set this to add, we're kind of missing a lot because it's not just showing up on the edges. That's a problem. Right. So we're going to have to deploy some other stuff. Now, maybe we go ahead and we use like a set mat effect onto this. And we're going to say, take the mat from what? Let's go ahead and take it. You can take the thing from, I guess, yourself, right? And we're going to look at the luminance channel. So hold on. We want to make sure that we are soloing this and that we are indeed seeing kind of the background. And we could like invert it and stuff, and we're basically cutting a hole out of it using itself.
Mhm.
However,
I'm a
things
fan
are,
of this technique.
yeah, it's getting us kind of the way there.
Kinda.
Uh, kind of. Okay. The way that the way these things can kind of get constructed to each other gets a little weird. So I'm going to go back to the original because it's easier to pick apart than it is to make the thing. Let's go back.
Some of these end up being, multiple instances of a thing like this being layered on top of each other in ways that are not always super discoverable because, as Evan and I were talking about before the show, sometimes you kind of know roughly what you're building, but then you just have to kind of build it. And you may end up having 3 copies of the thing that are all slightly different to really get the final look.
Yeah. So with this, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start by inverting the thing. Then I'm going to start by Gauss blurring the thing. Now, the edge is becoming a little bit indistinct. And then I'm going to actually CC Composite. So this is kind of the next step in the chain is then we CC Composite on top. Now, the CC Composite is taking the original thing, putting it back on. So that's before it was inverted. So we've ended up with this black and white thing. Now, the reason I've done it this way is because the find edges gave us a thin line, right? This gives us a line that is hard on one side, soft on the other side. Then I'm going to slip into this in between a little turbulent displace. So hard stop, soft edge, variable edge is what we've got now. On top of that, this is where things get a little bit wackadoo. I'm using a shift channels in order to say I'm going to take the luminance and reroute that into the alpha because I want the sort of blackness of the layer to go away and to only keep the lightness. Then it's just a matter of we're going to do a little bit of blurriness to taste. I'm going to use a little bit of a set matte on top of here. The set matte will clamp it to only. I've got one that's called the Burn Me layer, and that is the thing that we are burning. Remember, that's the contents. So if we observe it like this, you can see it's only showing up in places where that thing is. So that's why we end up with this thing that seems to follow the contours of the image as it goes, which is working out pretty nicely. And then from there, a little bit of tinting, a little bit of glowing, and we end up with this. Is...
And then like 12 more copies of that kind of thing to
yeah. But the crux of this thing, right, to generate these lines comes from inverting the thing, CC compositing, and then warping what's in between them to end up with this, I want to say, leading or trailing line that goes through. Now, that's one instance of a glowing edge. The other one is just a duplicate of that. And I used a little bit of, I don't know, that's the ashes. Let's not look at that. That one didn't work out. That was not as...
I will point out our time real quick, too, just in case you're not.
Yeah. So if you really want to dissect this thing, motiondesignhotline.com. So that's kind of the glowing edge. I think the other thing that's actually really important is let's talk about some of the darkened edges of this thing. So if we deploy some of that, it's a little bit difficult to see because it is kind of a subtle, and it is set to multiply, and we are using the preserve transparency of what's below. So we're getting a taste of that, which allows these to only happen to the Burn Me as it goes through. But the darkened edges it's just spreading darkness.
Kind of the same situation, but
exactly. All we're doing is we're starting raw like this. This is the transition control. We're blurring it. We're putting a curves on to put some clamp. A little bit of a fractal noise hanging out in the mid ranges. Shift those channels. Invert that result. Give it another bit of curves on there. And so now we've got this spreading glorpness coming from there. Set to multiply. And then stick it over top of what's happening below, and then you get burning edges. So that's so we've got bright things and we've got dark things, right? The photo's burning, it's becoming darker. You could use multiply, you could use like color burn. Anything from this family is going to provide that kind of crispified notes that you want. But I want to talk a little bit about the displacement because what we do also have here is a displacement map source. So again, we are using that original thing that's spreading, blur it, invert it, shift the channel, fractal noise, fast blur. Now you get this kind of spreading cloud. The spreading cloud, you'll notice it actually, because of the blurs, is overlapping that original image, use as displacement map, and now that is going to be displacement mapping this. I actually did 2 copies of I got a displacement map and then a turbulent displace on it, just because the whole thing should be crinkling and crackling as it's going. Hoo boy, there's a lot of stuff in here to get through. Again, motiondesignhotline.com, that's where you want to go to get your hands on these things. Kyle, I apologize for ripping and burning you in this. We're all still friends here.
Yeah, can we be friends again?
Yeah, let's next time.
All right.
We'd hug it out, but we do this remotely. So we will be back next week with a more harmonious episode, and the week after you'll see us here on Adobe Live. I think we're going to be doing. I think our plan is to do some character animation for that.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for the birth of a new monster. A modern Prometheus is us. But that's pretty much it. So Kyle, find you online, Kylosaurus Rex, all over the place. Find Evan online at EC Abrams.
Send us your questions. You can make an episode be yours.
Just like this. So Umacorn, I hope you enjoyed this one, and people, I hope we see you around for more. So until then. Stay creative, be kind to each other, and we'll see you around the internet. I think that's the time.
Thanks, everybody.